So I should probably at some point get round to railing on the Conservatives, just as soon as I get their manifesto. Until then, though, we've got Labour's. Oh boy, and this one was so good that a very wealthy, very famous singer in our country couldn't help but cry as she welcomed this particular manifesto that must totally make her a very, very wealthy lady who lives in a very, very expensive home feel so damn safe.
I think it's the best manifesto I've ever seen.
Well then, this manifesto must be quite something to get such a response. First of all, there is mention of inheritance tax. Now, the manifesto itself does not directly specify what it means. The current threshold for couples paying 40% death duties was raised from £660,000 to £1 million in 2015. Prior to the coalition in 2010, that number was £325,000. It means that those who own property, most importantly in the southeast, are almost certain to be caught by the duty. Income tax. Labour says it will lower the threshold for paying the 45p additional rate from £150,000 to £80,000, and a new super rich rate of 50p would be introduced to those earning more than £125,000. They claim that they will raise $5.4 billion doing this, because nothing incentivizes people more to work harder to earn more money or get bigger jobs that pay more than by being fleeced for every pound they make. Corporation tax. They reverse the cuts to corporation tax to make small profit rates 21% and the main rate 26%. The main rate is currently 19%. They believe that the amount raised will be £23.7 billion. Next, to tax the wealthy. Labour say it will tax income from wealth more equitably and efficiently. It has pledged to tax capital gains at the same rates as income tax. If you are a higher or additional rate taxpayer, you pay 28% on gains from the sale of residential property. Under Labour, that will increase to at least 40%. They believe they will raise $14 billion doing this. Financial transactions tax will extend stamp duty reserve duty on trades made in the city with an amount believed to be raising £8.8 billion. Tackling tax avoidance. Now this is a rather interesting one because more has been done to tackle it under the Conservatives than it was ever done under Labour. In fact, more loopholes were created during the time of Tony Blair. Labour has pledged to launch the biggest ever crackdown on tax avoidance and evasion through the introduction of a fair tax programme believing to raise £6.2 billion. There is a miscellaneous here. There's reverse inheritance tax cuts and levy on banks, impose VAT on private school fees, scrap the married person's allowance, and introduce a second homes tax, believing to raise £5.2 billion. However, it should be acknowledged now that while they're going to impose VAT on private school fees, they want to abolish private schools anyway, so this one seems a bit null and void. The total amount they believe they can raise from this additional tax is $83 billion. Understandably, with this much money being generated from additional tax, many have scrutinised it. The most reputable of them would be the Institute for Fiscal Studies, which is a non-partisan tax and spending think tank. They do not believe Labour's claim that they will be able to achieve everything it plans with 95% of taxpayers not having to pay any extra tax. Labour said that public sector workers, will get a pay rise worth more than $1,600 on average from April under its plans. I don't think this is possible with the tax plans they are putting forward. The director for the IFS, or Institute for Fiscal Studies, Paul Johnson, has said, "It is impossible to understate just how extraordinary this manifesto is, just in terms of the sheer scale of money being spent and raised through the tax system. Hundreds of billions of additional spending on investment, $80 billion plus per year on spending on day-to-day things, social security, spending on the NHS, student loans and so on, and matched by a supposedly 80 billion increase in tax. These are vast numbers, enormous, colossal in the context of anything we've seen in the last ever really, which is true, which is why we know John McDonnell's already said when coming to buying BT, they will use government loans, gilts. They will use gilts to get it. When asked if it would be possible to spend this amount of money with tax increases just affecting businesses and the richest 5% of individuals, Paul Johnson said the Labour Manifesto suggests they want to raise 80 billion of tax revenue, and they suggest that all of that will come from companies and people earning over 80k a year. That is simply not credible. We cannot raise that kind of money in our tax system without affecting individuals. Obviously, corporate tax affects individuals anyway. Someone has to pay that tax. But if you're looking about transforming society, which the Labour Party is absolutely upfront about doing, then you need to pay for it. And it can't be someone else who pays for it. We collectively will need to pay for it. And this is actually one of the most damning statements about this Labour policy and this manifesto. There are many things within it I actually don't think are that bad. But the money aspect is a huge glaring weakness in Labour. They are a cliché poor person who's given money, and they just throw it, and then go borrow it off Wonga, or whoever it is that has since replaced the now completely out of business Wonga. The fact is, while you have prioritised the environment, which I think is fantastic, your policy on spending and how you're going to raise money means taking us back to a time when Labour were in government, when it was literally everyone being taxed, even the lowest earners, just to put money back in the coffers because of how reckless your spending was. Somebody bothered to work out if you borrowed the 400 billion you wanted to borrow. It was worked out quite handily to be more than what was raised through regular tax from the entire country, which tells me you're punishing the very people you claim to want to represent, i.e. the next generation. I think to balance this all out, by the way, just because I'm done with this subject, I'm going to have to make Monday me railing the Conservatives for something, because otherwise I'm going to look like I'm only railing the left, and we have to be honest here. The Conservatives are hardly any better.